Our text is from our gospel reading, John chapter 20. Bible scholars, theologians, most all agree that this passage that is before us that we just heard is the climax, is the culmination of the entire story of the gospel according to John. This is the moment. So let's dig into this text and begin with verse 19. On the evening of that day, the first day of the week, the doors being locked where the disciples were for fear of the Jews, Jesus came, stood among them, and said to them, "Peace be with you." What's the setting? What's the scene? It is the evening of the first day of the week. It's not Easter morning, it's Easter night. The disciples and all those followers of Jesus are gathered together in that upper room, and the doors are locked. They are in despair. They're in fear. It says that the door was locked for fear of the Jews. This means the religious authorities, the ones who had despised and hated Jesus, who had arranged for him to be bound and arrested, to be beaten and scourged and crucified, and now they're concerned the very same thing might happen to them. They're in the midst of their despair and their fear. Even though Peter and John have already seen the empty tomb, and it says that they believed, Mary Magdalene herself has seen the risen Christ, yet still what they knew, they were beginning to know to be true, hadn't traveled from their head and done its work fully on their hearts. They were in fear. And so in the midst of this fear and despair, Jesus came, stood among them, and said, "Peace be with you." The Hebrew shalom, be with you, that there is a peace, there is a healing, there is a power that can be yours that's not dependent on your particular circumstances of your life, on your best days and on your worst days of grief and sorrow and fear. He says, peace, shalom, be with you. Those sound so beautiful. Beautiful words of Jesus, comforting words. But then Jesus goes on to speak and goes on to teach and to say something to them, which I think probably made them even more afraid. In verse 21, he says, "For a second time, peace be with you." And then he says, "As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you." Hear those words. As the Father has sent me, even so I am now sending you. As the Father has sent me. So God the Father sent God the Son, sent Christ into the world. And how did things work out for Jesus? Everything was wonderful, everything was honky-dory, he had a wonderful life. Of course not. God the Father sent his Son purposefully into the world that he might be despised and hated, again arrested, flogged, crucified. And now Jesus is saying, as the Father sent me, so now I am sending you. And history itself records for us that all of those apostles, those disciples who became apostles, and in fact thousands more who followed them, they were despised, they were hated, they were mistreated, they were flogged, they were beaten, and all but John himself, the author of this gospel, every single one of them died a martyr's death. And we say, how did they do it? This mission of God, the Missio Dei, sent out into the world. How do they do it? And how can we do it? How did they live so sacrificially? How can you live more sacrificially, not just holding on to the things that God has given to you, but yes, even financially to be able to give and to serve in God's mission? Well, Jesus here is preparing them and he's preparing us. Look at what he does. Again, he says, "Peace be with you." Then verse 20, when Jesus had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Jesus disappears. He says, "Peace be with you." And here's the proof of that peace that can be yours. Look at my hands. Look at my side. Look at my wounds. my scars, the marks of my suffering for you. Now think about this. Jesus has resurrected. It wasn't just a resuscitation. It was a resurrection. He is in a glorified state, in a glorified body. He even has walked through the walls and appeared in this upper room, and yet still he has the marks of his suffering. In his resurrected state, certainly he could have covered over those scars, those wounds, but no, there they are. And to this day, Christ bears the marks of his suffering, his wounds. We follow, we serve, we worship a wounded God. And in that, what is Jesus saying and showing? First of all, he is saying he's doing this so that you would know all the wounds and the scars and the sorrows of your life can begin to be healed in him. Think about those Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Jesus, John himself was there when they nailed Jesus to the cross, when they pierced his side, and how ugly and horrible those wounds must have appeared. And those nails and those wounds they knew had ruined their life. But now as he appears to them and shows them, those ugly wounds are transformed and made beautiful and glorious. And the nails, the wounds hadn't ruined their life. They now realized it had saved their life. And so the wounds of your life and the sorrows, each strand of sorrow has a place in his tapestry of grace. And it isn't just despite all of these things, it's actually through them all that the things that have hurt you the most will be transformed. Not just forgotten, but transformed. That God, as Paul tells us in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, God works all things for the good of those who love him. And there is someone in the room today or at home who needs to hear that message today, that God is working through all things for your good. That's the first thing the wounds show us. But then secondly, the wounds, he raises with the wounds. He says, look at the wounds in my hands, the wound in my side, because he's saying this is true. This really happened. I am really him. I'm the one who died and I am alive again. And it means that God really does love you. God really does want you. It means how much you matter to him. All of this is true. Hope, resurrection, and the transformation of this entire world. And this is then the story of Thomas. I love this. Verse 24, it says, now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. What does that mean? It means you will miss out if you don't show up for church. I mean, he missed out. Jesus was there. And he says, look, I'm never going to believe unless I can see him and reach out my hand and touch his wounds in his hands and place my hand in his side. I will never believe. 8 days later, Jesus then appears to them again. And again, he says, peace be with you. That's the third time. And then he turns immediately to Thomas, and he's not rebuking him. He is being so kind. He says, Thomas, put your finger here, see my hands, put out your hand, place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe. And Thomas says, my Lord and my God. And all of this is recorded. Again, this is the culmination, the climax, the moment that all of this has been leading to. And John, the writer here, is saying this to us today. Do you see how spoiled we were? I mean, we got the royal treatment. We were there. We saw. We even touched and we heard for 40 days after his resurrection. In other words, we didn't just see an apparition or a ghost or a faint little moment. We were there. We saw. We touched. This is why we went out into the world and we gave our lives, because it is true. It is true that death and the grave have been conquered. It is true that you are loved and wanted by God. And this is how they would go out into that mission. As we conclude here, what is the mission? What is the mission of Christ, of God? Verse 30 hints at it. Now, Jesus did many other signs, that's the key word, signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life. in his name. The life you were created to have, the life you will have in its fullness one day, not just existing forever, but truly living the life you were meant, made for, and created for. That's the life you can begin to have even now. Our mission at Our Father, helping ordinary people know and share extraordinary life in Christ. And he says that Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples. What are these signs? The signs that Jesus did, his miracles, miraculous signs. When Jesus first called his disciples, all the way back in John chapter 1, he says, you will see heaven opened and angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. You will see heaven opened. This is what these miraculous signs were, creating water into wine, a symbol of joy, of feeding the 5,000, the hungry and the poor, Jesus coming and giving sight to the blind and healing the sick and even raising the dead. What is Jesus doing? He is saying, this is who I am, this is my power and my glory, but he's saying, this is why I've come. This is my mission, is to reverse the effects of sin in this world. And he began even in his ministry to bring that future day of life into the world. Revelation chapter 21, God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. And he who was seated on the throne with his nail-scarred hands said, behold, I am making all things new. Present tense, Jesus is saying, I am already right now beginning the work of making all things new and transforming. We don't just escape this world when we die. It is about transforming this world and making it new and good. No more tears, no more mourning, no more crying, no more pain. Here's the application. In Mojo, Ethiopia, right now, there is a child with tears in his eyes. In Mojo, Ethiopia, right now, there is a mother who is living every day just on the edge of despair. There is a father in Mojo, Ethiopia, who is just struggling to find hope in a hopeless situation. And not just figuratively, not just like poetic language, but literally the living Christ who's on the throne with his nail-scarred hands, who is already beginning to make all things new through us together, will bring hope to the hopeless, will bring joy, that peace, that shalom into despair, and literally tears will be wiped away, and the work of transformation begun with our friends, our brothers and sisters in Ethiopia. Alleluia, Christ is risen.